The dining room of Maison Gaines was full that evening. Warm amber light caught the rims of wine glasses. Jazz moved softly through the air, unhurried, elegant, the kind of music chosen by someone who understood what a room should feel like. Then Brittany Voss raised her hand and pointed toward the door. "Sir." Her voice was polite, precise, loud enough for the nearest 4 tables to hear every syllable. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The man she was pointing at didn't move. He stood at the host stand in a gray cardigan and charcoal slacks, his hands loose at his sides, his face completely still. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he has seen before and hoped not to see again. A table of 4 went silent. Forks hovered. A woman in a red dress slowly set down her wine glass. The security guard was already moving across the floor. Quote 2, Brittany's chin lifted. "This establishment has standards. I think you may have wandered in by mistake." The old man exhaled once through his nose. Quiet. Measured. "I don't believe I have," he said. That was all. No raised voice, no trembling hands, just 7 words, spoken the way a man speaks when he has spent a lifetime choosing them carefully. The security guard slowed. Something in the old man's stillness made him hesitate, some quality that had nothing to do with the cardigan or the worn dress shoes or the $43 in his wallet. The guard's hand stayed at his side. He didn't know why. Not yet. And then the kitchen door swung open. A man in his late 50s stepped through, flour on his jacket, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, the look of someone who had just been checking inventory and suddenly understood that the most important thing happening tonight was not in the kitchen. He stopped. He looked at the old man standing at the host stand. His face changed completely. Quote 5. One word, said like a man who had just understood everything, all of it, all at once, and felt the full weight of it land. Brittany turned. The dining room held its breath. Somewhere near the kitchen window, a cook named Rosa pressed her hand flat against the wall and closed her eyes. But that's not what any of them expected to happen next. Before we get back to that moment, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, make sure you're subscribed. We tell stories like this every week. But to understand what really happened that evening, we have to go back. Back to a Tuesday morning that started like any other. A small apartment on the 4th floor, a bowl of oatmeal with brown sugar and a sliced banana, and a gray cardigan folded over a chair the night before, ready for a day its owner had been keeping for 12 years. The apartment smelled like old wood and instant coffee, and, faintly, like lavender. The same soap Evelyn had used for 40 years. Walter still bought it. Same brand, same purple label, same small bar sitting on the edge of the bathroom sink. The fun is just beginning. Tell us what city you're from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. The tension is rising. Who's watching from where? Like and subscribe to the channel, more to come. More to. Tell us in the comments who's from which country, and give us a like and subscribe. The plot thickens. Let's check our geography. Tell us where you are now, give the video a thumbs up, and subscribe. We're just warming up. Tell us where you're watching from. Give the video a like and hit the subscribe button. The climax is near. Share where you're from, like, and be sure to subscribe. Events are unfolding rapidly. Write your city in the chat, give it a like, and subscribe so you don't get lost. The juiciest part is yet to come. Let's get started. Get to know each other. Where are you from? Like and subscribe right now. The suspense is building. Tell us where you're watching this episode from, and reward us with a like and a subscribe. The excitement is running high. Tell us what city you're from now. Give us a big like and subscribe to the channel. He never thought much about why. It was just part of the morning. He moved to the kitchen in his undershirt and slacks, the linoleum cool under his bare feet. The oatmeal went on first, brown sugar, 1 banana, sliced thin. He had eaten the same breakfast for 31 years, and he saw no reason to stop now. The kitchen table had 2 chairs. One was pushed in from the day Evelyn died, and Walter had never moved it. He ate at his own chair facing the window, where a spider plant named Gerald sat on the sill, green and overgrown, and completely unbothered by the world. Quote _6 __. Walter said. Gerald did not respond. Walter nodded, satisfied, and finished his oatmeal. He dressed carefully. The gray cardigan first, the one Evelyn had given him for his 60th birthday, soft at the elbows from years of wear. Then the charcoal slacks with the faint crease he'd pressed in himself the night before. Then the black dress shoes, resoled twice at Mr. Kim's shop on Delaney Street, buffed until they held a quiet shine. He checked his wallet at the door. $43, a transit card, a photograph, Evelyn at a small diner table, laughing at something off camera, her head tilted back, her earrings catching the light. Their third date, not the restaurant, just a diner. He had loved her before the restaurant existed, and he had never forgotten that. He took the stairs down 4 flights, one hand on the rail, and stepped out into the October morning. The first bus smelled like exhaust and someone's fast food breakfast. Walter found a window seat and watched the city move past, corner stores pulling up their metal gates, a woman walking a dog the size of a small couch, 2 kids in school uniforms arguing about something with the full intensity only 11-year-olds can manage. He transferred at Meridian and waited 7 minutes for the second bus. An older woman sat beside him at the stop, pulling her coat tight. "Cold today," she said. "It is," Walter agreed. "Good coat, though." She smiled. "My daughter gave it to me. She's got good taste." The woman laughed softly, and they rode in comfortable silence the rest of the way. Walter got off at Clement Street and walked the last 2 blocks. He had made this same trip every year on this date for 12 years. He never called ahead. He never made a fuss. He simply came, sat at his table, ordered the lamb chops, and spent an hour with the memory of everything this place had once cost him and everything it had given back. He turned the corner. The sign above the entrance caught the afternoon light, clean brass letters on dark wood, Maison Gaines. Walter looked at it for a moment, the way a man looks at something that belongs to him and has always belonged to him, even when the world forgot. Then he pushed open the door. The warmth hit him first, roasted garlic and red wine reduction, and something sweet from the bread oven, the smell of a kitchen that knew what it was doing. Walter breathed it in and felt something in his chest loosen, the way it always did when he came back here. The dining room was exactly as he remembered. Amber light from the pendant fixtures he and David had argued about for 2 weeks before agreeing they were right. Exposed brick walls lined with paintings, local black artists, every one of them, a detail Walter had insisted on before the ink dried on any contract. The jazz moved through the room at the same tempo it always had, unhurried, considered. He stood just inside the entrance and let himself have one quiet moment with it. Then he saw her. Brittany Voss stood at the host stand with the posture of someone who had decided, at some point, that posture was the same thing as authority. She was 26, maybe 27, in a fitted black blazer with the restaurant's small logo on the lapel. Her hair was pulled back without a strand out of place. She held a leather reservation book like it was a credential. She looked up. Her eyes moved across Walter in under 2 seconds. Cardigan, slacks, resoled shoes, age, and something in her expression settled into a shape that was almost, but not quite, A smile. Underscore, underscore. Quote, underscore, 1, 2, underscore, underscore. Her voice was smooth. Practiced. Quote, 13, quote, 14, Walter said. Quote, 15. She opened the book. Her finger moved down the page, then back up, then down again. Walter waited a beat. She didn't look up. But I don't have anything here, and we are quite full this evening. Walter glanced past her. 3 tables sat empty in the middle of the room, their white cloths pressed and undisturbed. He said nothing about them. He simply looked back at her. I'd be happy to wait, he said. It could be a very long wait. She closed the book. You may be more comfortable somewhere. The door opened behind Walter. Cold air came in with it, along with a couple, the man in a charcoal blazer, the woman in a silk blouse the color of cream, heels that clicked against the entryway tile like a metronome. Brittany's entire face changed. The almost smile became a real one. Quote 23. She reached for 2 menus without being asked. She was already moving, already guiding them past Walter as if he were a piece of furniture she'd worked around so many times she no longer registered it. Walter stood at the host stand, alone. The leather reservation book closed in front of him. Near the host stand, easy to miss if you weren't looking, hung a small framed photograph, the original partners at the ribbon cutting 12 years ago. A younger Walter stood in the center, wearing a suit, holding a pair of scissors. Nobody had looked at it in months. Walter waited. He stood to the side of the host stand, hands folded in front of him, and watched the room the way he used to watch a classroom, quietly, missing nothing. A server named Marcus moved between tables with a water pitcher, refilling glasses without being asked. He was 24, maybe, with careful eyes and the efficient rhythm of someone who had learned the job properly. He glanced at Walter once, then looked away. Walter noticed that too. 10 minutes passed. Brittany returned to the host stand, checked something in the reservation book, and looked up as though surprised he was still there. Quote 25. Quote 26, Walter said. Quote 27, quote. She held his gaze for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes, not cruelty, exactly, more like a calculation, a determination that this particular situation needed to be resolved. Quote, and 28? Quote, she said, lowering her voice just slightly. Quote, 29. Walter looked at her. His expression didn't change. I'd like a table, he said. Please. Her jaw tightened. A small thing, almost invisible. At table 7, a woman named Helen Marsh set down her wine glass. She was 68, with silver hair and the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades in courtrooms and learned that the most important moments were the quiet ones. She had been watching since Walter walked in. She recognized something in the exchange, the architecture of it, the way one person's voice stayed level while the others rose in increments so small they could almost pass for politeness. Brittany straightened. Her voice lifted, not loud, but loud enough. Sir, this restaurant has clientele expectations. I'm not sure you fully understand. I understand perfectly, Walter said. A fork clinked against a plate at the table nearest the host stand. Then silence. The jazz kept playing. Nobody else moved. Marcus stopped walking. The water pitcher hung at his side. He stared at the floor near his left shoe, and his jaw worked like he was chewing something he couldn't swallow. Brittany gestured toward the entrance. Clean. Decisive. The kind of gesture designed to end things. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 34, underscore, underscore. Walter's hands stayed at his sides. His breathing didn't change. He had stood in front of rooms full of people for 28 years. Students, parents, school board members, people who thought their authority was the most important thing in any given space. And he had never once let someone else's noise become his own. He didn't move. Brittany turned to the floor. Quote, 35. The security guard came across the room, broad-shouldered, mid-30s, moving with the measured pace of someone trained to de-escalate. He reached Walter and stopped. He looked at the old man's face. Something stopped him. He didn't know what. Some quality in the stillness, some weight in the eyes looking back at him that made his next step feel like the most important one he'd taken in a long time. His hand stayed at his side. He did not reach for Walter's arm. Helen Marsh had spent 31 years on the bench. She knew the difference between a misunderstanding and a decision. What she had just watched was a decision. She set her napkin on the table, pushed back her chair, and spoke in the clear, unhurried voice she had used in courtrooms for 3 decades. The words cut through the jazz like a knife through water. The dining room went completely still. A wineglass caught the amber light. Nobody moved. Brittany turned. Her composure held. Barely. Quote, 38, quote, 39, Helen said. Quote, 40, quote, Brittany's mouth closed, opened, closed again. Walter glanced at Helen. A small nod. Nothing more. He had not asked for her help, and he would not perform gratitude like a man who was surprised to receive basic decency. He simply acknowledged it the way one dignified person acknowledges another. Terence still hadn't moved. He stood 2 feet from Walter, and something about that distance felt deliberate, like a man who had made a choice without fully understanding it yet. Brittany looked at Terence. Her eyes said, "Do your job." Terence looked at Walter's face, the lines in it, the patience, the absolute absence of fear. He had seen that face before. He was almost certain of it. He just couldn't place where. Quote 41. Terence said quietly, so only Walter could hear. Quote 42. Walter looked at him. Quote 43, he said. Quote 44. That was the moment Marcus broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. He simply set the water pitcher down on an empty table, pressed his hand flat against its surface, and stared at nothing. His throat moved. He was 24 years old, and he had worked in this room for 3 years, and he had just watched something happen that he would not be able to unknow. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stood there, with his hand on the table, holding himself still. And then the kitchen door swung open. David Park came through it, with flour on his jacket, and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the distracted expression of a man who had been counting inventory and was already thinking about 3 other things. He took 2 steps into the dining room and stopped. He saw Walter. Everything else in the room, the amber light, the jazz, the held breath of 26 people, it all continued exactly as before. But David Park went completely still. His face did not show surprise. It showed something older and heavier than surprise. It showed recognition. And beneath that, something that looked very much like shame. Quote, 45 one word, spoken quietly. But in that silence, it carried across the entire room. Brittany turned toward the voice. She looked at David, her manager, the man whose name she knew, the man who signed the weekly schedules, and she watched his face, and for the first time that evening, something cold moved through her chest. She didn't know what she was seeing yet. She was about to find out. David crossed the dining room floor without hurrying. His shoes made a soft, steady sound against the hardwood, the walk of a man who owned the ground he was moving across and had never needed to announce it. He stopped at the host stand. He looked at Brittany. Then he looked at the reservation book still closed under her hand. "Do you know whose name is on this building?" Brittany straightened. Her voice was careful. "Yours and Mr. Say it." A beat of silence. "Gaines," she said. David nodded once. He turned to Walter, and something in his expression shifted. the professionalism falling away, leaving something older and plainer underneath. "Come on, old friend." His voice was quiet. "Your table is ready." The dining room exhaled, not loudly, just a collective loosening, shoulders dropping, breath releasing, the particular relief of people who had been watching something go wrong and were now watching it stop. Helen Marsh lifted her wine glass, just slightly, just enough. Walter walked past the host's stand without looking at Brittany. Not out of contempt, simply because she was no longer the most important thing in the room. She had never been the most important thing in the room. Brittany stood very still. The leather reservation book was smooth and cool under her fingers. She was aware of every table that had just watched that exchange. She was aware of Marcus still standing with his hand on the empty table. She was aware of the exact quality of the silence that followed Walter across the floor. She had been reading rooms her entire career. She had built her confidence on that skill, on knowing, in 2 seconds, what a room needed and who belonged in it. She had been wrong, completely, publicly, irreversibly wrong, and she didn't yet understand the full shape of how wrong. David led Walter to the corner booth, table 12. The leather was worn soft at the edges, in a way that new furniture never is, the kind of softness that comes from years of the same hands, the same elbows, the same quiet conversations over good food. Walter sat down. He smoothed the front of his cardigan once and looked around the room. The amber light, the paintings on the brick walls, the jazz moving through the air like something alive. In the kitchen, Rosa pressed her face close to the pass-through window. She was 55 years old and had worked this kitchen for 7 years, and she had heard the stories about the early days from the line cooks who'd been there from the beginning. She knew exactly who was sitting at table 12. She pressed her hand flat against her chest and exhaled. "He's here," she said to no one in particular. The cook beside her looked up. "Who is?" Rosa just shook her head and reached for a clean apron. At the host stand, Brittany finally moved. She opened the reservation book again, stared at the page without reading it, and closed it. Her reflection caught briefly in the dark window beside the entrance. Pressed blazer, perfect posture, not a hair out of place. She looked exactly like someone who had everything under control. She had never been further from it. David slid into the seat across from Walter and folded his hands on the table. Rosa had already sent out a bread basket, warm, cloth-covered, smelling of rosemary, without being asked. Some things in this kitchen ran on memory, older than any menu. "I should have been out front," David said. "You were working." Walter tore a small piece of bread. "You're always working." "That's not an excuse." "No," Walter agreed. "It isn't." They sat with that for a moment. The jazz shifted into something slower, a piano piece Walter recognized from the original playlist he'd built in 2012, sitting at David's kitchen table with a cup of tea and a legal pad, writing down song titles by hand. "How long has it been like this?" Walter asked. David looked at the table. "She's been floor manager 8 months. She's good at the operational side. Numbers, reservations, staff scheduling." He paused. "I didn't see the other part clearly enough." "The other part," Walter said. "The way she reads people at the door." David's jaw tightened. Quote, 65, quote, 66. Walter set the bread down. Quote, 67, quote. Across the room, Marcus was taking an order at table 9, writing on his pad with the focused precision of someone performing a task to avoid thinking about something else entirely. His pen moved. His face stayed neutral, but his eyes kept drifting, just briefly, just for a second, toward table 12. He had worked in this room for 3 years. He had walked past that small framed photograph near the host stand hundreds of times. He had never once stopped to look at it closely. He was thinking about that now. The lamb chops arrived. Rosa had plated them herself. He could tell by the way the rosemary sprig was placed, slightly off-center, the way she always did it. A small signature, a quiet act of welcome. Walter looked at the plate for a moment before picking up his fork. Quote, 68, quote, he said. David smiled. It was a tired smile, but a real one. Quote, 69, quote, 70, quote. They ate in companionable silence for a while. The amber light held the room in its usual warmth. A couple near the window laughed softly at something. A child at the table by the wall, no older than 7, in a clip-on tie that had gone crooked, was carefully arranging sugar packets into a small tower while his parents talked. Walter watched the boy for a moment. The focused seriousness of it. The way children commit completely to whatever is in front of them. He thought about the students he'd known, 38 years worth of them. Some of them were grandparents now. He set his fork down. Quote, 71, quote, he said. Quote, 72, quote. David looked up. Quote, 73, quote. Walter said. Quote, 74, quote. David studied his old friend's face. He knew the fluorescent light above her buzzed faintly, casting the kind of flat, unforgiving brightness that exists only in back corridors, nowhere to soften it, nowhere to hide. He'd like a word, David said. Table 12, when you're ready. Brittany's finger stopped moving on the screen. Quote, 78, quote, 79, David repeated. Then he walked back toward the kitchen. She stood in the hallway for a long moment. The tablet was cool and smooth in her hands. She could hear the dining room through the wall, the low murmur of conversation, the clink of cutlery, the jazz she had stopped noticing months ago because it was simply always there. She thought about the couple she had seated without hesitation. The silk blouse, the charcoal blazer, the 2 seconds it had taken her to decide they belonged. She thought about the cardigan. Her reflection caught in the dark screen of her tablet, pressed blazer, hair in place. And she looked at it for a moment before tucking the tablet under her arm and walking toward the dining room. Walter was alone at table 12. David had gone back to the kitchen. The dinner plates had been cleared, and Walter sat with his hands folded on the white cloth, a small glass of wine in front of him, barely touched. He looked like a man who had been waiting, not impatiently, not anxiously, just waiting. The way people wait when they have learned that most things worth waiting for eventually arrive. Brittany stopped at the edge of the table. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Walter said. She sat. The leather booth was warm from the ambient heat of the room. She placed her hands in her lap and kept them still through sheer effort. Walter looked at her for a moment without speaking, not to intimidate, simply to see her clearly before he said what he had come to say. Quote, 82, quote, he said. Quote, 83, quote. She nodded. Quote, 84, quote. The question landed quietly. No anger in it, no performance. Just the question itself, sitting on the table between them like something solid. Brittany opened her mouth. Quote, 85. She stopped. She tried again. Quote, 86. She stopped again. Walter waited. She looked down at her hands. The dining room continued around them, warm, amber, unhurried. A woman laughed softly at a nearby table. The jazz moved through the air like it always did. Quote, 87, Brittany said finally. Her voice was very quiet. Quote, 88. Quote, 89, Walter said. Quote, 90. She looked up. His face held no satisfaction, no triumph. Just the steady, considered attention of a man who had spent a lifetime looking at people and trying to understand what had made them who they were. He folded his hands on the table. Quote, 91. Quote, he said. Quote, 92. Quote. Brittany straightened in her seat, her hands pressed flat against her thighs. She listened. Walter told her everything. Not loudly, not with the weight of accusation. He told her about 2012, the empty building on Clement Street, the lease signed with borrowed money, the months he and David spent building the menu by hand. He told her about Evelyn, who had tasted every dish before it went on the menu and sent 3 of them back. He told her about the name above the door and what it had cost to put it there. Brittany sat without moving. Her hands were flat on her thighs. The amber light caught the edge of her jaw. Quote, 93, Walter said. Quote, 94. The words sat between them like objects on the table. Clean, specific, impossible to move. Brittany's throat worked. I didn't know. I understand that, Walter said. That's not the part I'm asking you to think about. She looked at him. You didn't know my name, he said. You didn't know my face. But you made a decision about me the moment I walked through that door. I want you to think about what information you used to make that decision. Silence. The jazz played softly. A fork clinked at a nearby table. The cardigan, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. The cardigan, Walter confirmed. The shoes, the age, the face. He paused. You looked at me and decided what I was, and then you acted on it, in front of a full dining room. Brittany's eyes were bright. She was not going to cry in this dining room. She pressed her back against the booth and held herself very still. Walter said. She nodded. One small movement. She looked up, that she hadn't expected. You're good at this work, he said. The operational side. David told me. I believe him. He folded his hands on the table. But you learned something wrong somewhere along the way about what this work is actually for. That can be unlearned, if you're willing. She stared at him. The dining room moved around them, warm, unhurried, completely unaware that something was shifting permanently at table 12. Why would you do that? She asked. Walter considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Because I was a school principal for 28 years, he said, and I never once believed that the worst moment a person had was the only moment that mattered. Brittany pressed her fingers against her mouth, just briefly, just for a second. Walter slid out of the booth and stood. He straightened the front of his cardigan, gray wool, soft at the elbows, given to him by a woman who had known exactly who he was. He looked at Brittany one last time. Think about what you were protecting, he said. Take your time with it. The answer matters. Then he walked toward the door, passing the small framed photograph near the host stand without stopping. The younger Walter, the scissors, the ribbon, the beginning of everything. He didn't need to look at it. He remembered the day perfectly. 3 months later, the photograph behind the host stand was larger. Impossible to miss. A wide frame, dark wood, hung at eye level. Walter and David at the ribbon cutting 12 years ago, scissors raised, both of them laughing at something just off camera. Below it, a small brass plate, founded 2012. Walter Gaines and David Park. Every person who walked through the door saw it now. Marcus stood in front of the new staff one Thursday morning, a printed training guide in his hands, the dining room quiet around him before the lunch rush. The guide was called The Dignity Standard. Walter had written it himself, the same way he used to write curriculum. Clear language, specific examples, no room for comfortable vagueness. __. Quote _1. 15__1 of the newer servers had asked Marcus when the assignment was announced. Marcus had thought about it for a moment. Quote 116, he said. Quote 117. He hadn't argued with that. He wasn't sure he ever would. Terence was still on staff. Walter had kept him without explanation until Terence finally asked why. Walter had looked at him and said, ___, quote, _118, ___. Terence had nodded slowly and gone back to work. He stood a little differently after that, not taller exactly, but more deliberate, like a man who understood the weight of a single moment. Brittany had spent the first 2 weeks after that night unable to sleep past 4 in the morning. She would lie in the dark of her apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the cardigan, the shoes, the 2 seconds. She had been so certain. She was working now at a non-profit that ran hospitality training programs for young people aging out of the foster system. The director had called Walter's reference letter the most honest recommendation I've ever received. Brittany had read it once, then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer she didn't open often. She was learning something different about what a room needed. It was slower work than she expected. She found she didn't mind. On a Thursday morning in January, Walter came in before the lunch rush. The cold came in with him briefly, then the door closed and the warmth of the room settled around him. Roasted garlic, fresh bread, the jazz he had chosen from a legal pad at David's kitchen table 13 years ago. Rosa brought coffee to table 12 without being asked. She set it down and patted the edge of the table once, lightly, the way you touch something you're glad is still there. "Same as always, Mr. Gaines," she said. "Same as always, Rosa." He wrapped both hands around the mug. He looked around the room. The amber light, the paintings on the brick walls, local artists, every one. The photograph by the door, gleaming in its dark frame. He reached into his wallet and took out Evelyn's photograph, set it on the table, facing the room. Her head tilted back, her earrings catching the light. That laugh. ___, quote, _122, ___, he said quietly. Walter Gaines never wanted this story to go public, but 3 staff members told it anyway, because some things need to be said out loud. He didn't press charges. He didn't call the press. He went back the following Tuesday and ordered the lamb chops again. That's the kind of man he is. Have you ever been in that dining room? Have you ever been the one at the door making a call in 2 seconds that you told yourself was about standards? Tell us in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Like and subscribe. And remember, dignity doesn't walk in wearing a sign. Sometimes it walks in wearing a cardigan.